Good afternoon. It's been quite a while and I hope you're all keeping well. On today's GYSGYB show by the sales organisation and myself, Andrea Treaties, we're going to talk about two elements of outbound sales, cold calling and cold emailing. Now, some of what will be shared on the show today may come across as controversial, particularly to those who are strong advocates of cold calling and cold emailing. But I really feel this is a topic that many are unwilling to accept as inefficient and ineffective. Over the last 5 or more years, there has been a shift in how businesses attract leads. This has seen businesses reduce their marketing teams, budgets, and move from inbound leads generation to outbound, essentially passing on a significant chunk of the marketing effort onto the sales team. It's not to say they spend nothing on performance marketing, but today many businesses spend a lot less, and some indeed nothing. This means progress is slower and expenditure on headcount and tools higher. Essentially, your sales team becomes a small, and I'd say inadequate marketing engine. Salespeople are not marketeers. In saying that, I've spoken to a number of ex-sales colleagues who still do cold prospecting and seem quite happy with the results, which is great because, as any salesperson knows, it's no easy task to go out into greenfields and actually generate interest and consequently pipe. Now, there is a but. What if their places of work also generated inbound leads? How much more pipe could be generated? How much more commission could they get? Obviously, the answer is much more, and consequently, their roles would be much more rewarding. It also begs the question on resources. Would these companies need as many salespeople to reach their sales targets? Unfortunately, though, as part of this shift, salespeople have become hybrid. That is to say, they perform both a business development function as well as the sales function, a 2-for-1. This somewhat defeats the purpose of being an account executive when, in effect, you're still doing a biz dev job on top of your sales job. Ironically, though, some companies have both biz dev and sales teams where all do outbound prospecting. Is this really the most effective way of running your sales organization? Now, there's a mix of 4 areas that have contributed to these changes, as we will now explore. Firstly, it has to do with complex solutions, where SaaS companies are creating a category. They are solving problems many of their potential customers don't even realize they have, and that makes it difficult to communicate. This is what they believe justifies a more targeted approach, focusing on those who your business has defined as ICP, or Ideal Customer Profile. More targeted is also known as more limited, that is to say, smaller target audience. I'm just saying. And deciding who your ICP is versus your customer deciding whether or not your solution is good for them is not very customer-centric, but product-centric. If you recall the podcast I did on communication and language, I talked about how complex offerings need to accommodate for that complexity by translating its feature functionality into simple language. That is to say, something your ICP will understand and see the value in. However, as stated, these types of companies have a tendency to be so focused on the product, they dictate who it is for and why, something that ignores and neglects those who could truly benefit from such a solution but don't fall under the business's definition of ICP. Honestly though, solving problems that no one knows they have just doesn't sound that compelling to me, but that's just me. The next point is on cost. Performance marketing is not cheap. With nearly 4 million websites going live each day, the competition for both paid search and keywords is fierce and therefore expensive. The cost of a large sales team is also expensive though, and greatly limits your brand visibility, as it can only target so many prospects versus the internet, which can potentially target hundreds of thousands, if not millions each day. The third is about effectiveness, both from a marketing function and how sales manage inbound leads. On the one hand, when this function is managed in-house, it is not always optimal and influenced by non-marketeers, that is to say, leaders who think they know or understand what their brand is or should be associated with, rather than what is actually trending in terms of keywords and competition. And on the other, It's poor leads management, where leads simply don't get the attention and diligence they deserve. This is probably more of a historical point, though, which has acted as an ingredient and fueled the shift from inbound to outbound prospecting. Finally, innovation or lack of. The array of solutions out there are just not as compelling as they were when companies like Zendesk, DocuSign, SurveyMonkey, Slack, Salesforce, HubSpot, MailChimp, and others launched. These provided and continue to provide solutions for real problems that all businesses have. Today, in between the complex solutions and solutions for solutions in the shape of extensions or add-ons, just makes for a more complex, cost-heavy business ecosystem. I mean, do you really need all the software you have for sales? And as for the complex solutions, how great a problem is it that these resolve if most are unaware of the problem in the first place? Is it a lack of creativity and inspiration, or that product-centric mindset where we're looking to create the next unicorn, but in effect create some sort of mutant which nobody gets? So in between complex solutions, cost, effectiveness, and questionable innovation, businesses shift to outbound, in part for control and in part because of an arrogant belief that they know better what their potential audience needs and can do it better with sales versus performance marketing. So this is where cold emailing and cold calling come into play. Let's take a look at cold emailing first. So you have sequencing, which uses generic yet personalized messaging and is a volume-based approach. There are plenty of tools used to perform this activity, such as Cognism, Outreach, HubSpot, Yesware, Apollo, Mixmax, ActiveCampaign, and the list just goes on. Already you can see how many solutions exist for the same task. Now imagine receiving sequenced emails from all of those trying to get your attention. This approach is good for tracking purposes from email opens to email clicks and gives you a decent guide on which prospects to cold call. However, the amount of meetings and actual pipe generated will only be a small fraction of the thousands of emails you sent out. Not to mention, you need to repeat this activity by adding more companies and contacts into your CRM every single week. Following on from sequences, you have the highly tailored, personalized email, which does deliver better results, but takes a lot of research and time. Key question here, even with AI, is how many can you send out in one day? And will that suffice to generate the necessary pipe and revenue to hit targets? Sometimes in both cases, where response rates are low, leadership may question your messaging approach. For example, you have 5 key accounts where you've been sending a mix of both sequenced and tailored emails, but you're not getting any traction. You may be called into meetings or in a one-to-one to review your messaging. This critique that it is the message which is to blame for lack of response is really harsh and doesn't look at the obvious reason for why they aren't responding. As long as the message is well written and has a clear call to action, I don't believe that the messaging is the problem. I believe that either timing is not relevant or that those target accounts have no interest to engage. And I honestly don't believe that the message will change anything. If you keep on knocking and the door won't open, that in itself is a response. The idea that there's a magical message which creates excitement and enthusiasm, even an urgency to pick up the phone and call that sales rep, just doesn't exist. If there was such a message, we salespeople would be rich. The bottom line, though, with emailing is that senior leaders are getting tsunamied with sales emails on a daily basis. It is a game of numbers, but really, it is a game of decimals. The output required to generate a return is colossal. Now moving on to cold calling. This isn't for the faint-hearted and requires confidence, structure, and great pace and tonality. There are 2 key approaches which in my experience work best. These are email first and then call. At least this gives you a reason to call and a point of reference for the prospect, regardless of whether or not they are receptive. I guarantee that in an unsuccessful call where you have sent an email, the prospect will take a look at the email you sent them. Second tactic, which works very well, is the upfront contract. So literally just state that this is a cold call, swiftly introducing yourself, the company you're calling from, and why you're calling. But it is not the most effective approach, as we will now discuss. In the state of cold calling, a report Cognism put together, they confirm that cold calling is the most underutilized channel for outbound. I wonder if it is a question of underutilization or ineffectiveness. Whilst I won't dive into the report into great detail, I do want to highlight some of the numbers which correlate with the statement we made about cold emailing being a game of decimals. Let's take a look at some of those statistics. So in the report, they say that out of 55,701 dials, 5,265 conversations took place, or a conversion of 9.5%. And of those conversations, 254 meetings were booked, or 4.8% of the 5,265, but just 0.0045% of the 55,701 dials. In this report, which offers good insight, by the way, even though it is promotional, they also include an interesting bar chart, which is pretty obvious, and it illustrates that the more times you attempt to get through to a prospect, the more successful you'll be. Now, the big question is, how efficient and effective is this, though? Let's take an exaggerated example based on that report of one salesperson making 100 dials per day. It would take them 557 working days to achieve. And whilst they'd be having about 9 conversations per day, in that time frame, they'd only be having one meeting every 2 days. And out of those meetings, how many would ultimately convert into a deal, let alone a sale? Add all the time it takes, even with a great solution like Cognizant, to research contacts, find emails, and of course numbers. And those 557 days easily double, if not triple, and with that, those percentages disintegrate. Yet, so many leaders are gung-ho about how great this approach is. The thing I don't like about cold calls and cold emailing is the general enthusiasm there is, even a certain level of hypocrisy, you could say. How many of us actually like receiving cold calls? Honestly, ask yourselves that question. I know I'm not a fan, and in this instance, I really don't think it's just me. The most typical cold calls we all get as consumers are from telco, energy, broadband providers asking you to switch. Now, it's a nuisance, and most of us don't entertain those calls. The same principle applies to B2B sales. But let's say, going on from that example, if you had companies like McDonald's, right? So imagine they started calling you out of the blue to see if you'd like to have some chicken nuggets or a Big Mac meal. Are you really going to continue loving it? Or you have L'Oreal calling to see if you need any cosmetic products. Do you really think it's because you're worth it? Or Nike calling to see if you need new athletic gear or footwear. Please, honestly, just don't do it, right? And this is the mindset that we seem to ignore in all our enthusiasm for cold prospecting. Now, the key reason those types of companies don't cold call or cold email is simple. They advertise. And this is really the point. In B2B, the same principle applies, and it is all down to performance marketing, which I know is not the same as brand marketing, but both aspire to achieve the same goal, and that is to grow brand awareness. Your reach online is so much more vast that it not only gets your brand in front of those actively seeking a solution, but grows brand presence and awareness much more effectively than any sales team could. The goal is to get your brand in front of those who are actively searching for your solution, not just those you believe your solution is a good fit for. And from there, have your salespeople manage the conversation, build pipe, and close deals. Now, we have to remember, sales is about starting a conversation. And to start a conversation, someone has to be willing to speak with you. The best frame of mind for a buyer to do this is when they are ready, not when you decide they need to be ready. So coming to the end of the show now, and to conclude, I realize some of what has been discussed may be met with what the hell is this guy talking about? And that's fine. I honestly feel, though, many businesses have forgotten the basic principles of buyer behavior and, in fact, ignore how they themselves as consumers buy products and services. Customer centricity is a huge focus area for all brands, but today seems to be more of a marketing message that, we're customer centric. But very few of these companies actually act that way. Cold calling, cold emailing are perfect examples of this, much the same way as creating solutions for problems that don't really exist. Those who have a product-centric mindset struggle to sell and grow their business, and they wonder why. To me, and those with common business sense, it should be obvious. What these businesses have forgotten is that sales is about facilitating the buying process, not forcing it. And yet, by being product-centric, they ironically make the process incredibly challenging, both for themselves and prospective customers. For me, the sale really doesn't start when the customer says no. It begins when a customer has identified a problem, which is a priority, followed by a search for suitable solutions online where they eventually reach out to you and enter your sales funnel. And that human factor is what these product-centric businesses neglect. I mean, do you honestly want someone you don't know to tell you about problems you're not aware of? Or better ways for you to do your job when up to now you've been doing a good job? And even if you haven't, is it a priority that, let's say, supersedes your happiness in your personal life? Okay, so what's the solution then? Well, the mindset must change to accept how the buying process actually takes place. That's a first. Secondly, as per my podcast titled Communication and Language, you need to find a way to communicate your solution in basic, simple language. If you want to attract attention and generate interest, it has to be easy to understand what problem you fix. Listen, I'm not against outbound prospecting, but at the rate businesses expect results, it'll always fall short. A mix of inbound and outbound is of course the best approach, but I'd say 70% inbound and 30% outbound, the latter of which is 100% managed by the business development team, allowing sales to focus and research on active leads and deals. I hope this show is well received and provides you with some food for thought, perhaps even a reconsideration of your overall sales approach. I'll keep you posted on the next podcast, and thank you all for listening. Bye-bye.